Hi everyone, my name is Dhruv and I'm coming you to live from DC. I'm a digital marketing lead working at Velocity Growth, who are the title sponsors of DC Startup Week. Thank you for joining us. DC Startup Week is a 5-day conference held in the fall every year focused on building the startup community. We want to give a quick shout out to our little title sponsors, next by Shuman Rogers, Silicon Valley Bank, Zendesk, Velocity Growth, Think Nimble, Aronson, and NFP. This track is sponsored by Pepco, Velocity Growth, and Age Tech Collaborative from AARP. We are so excited to have Colin Crowley to speak on top 5 CX strategies every startup should consider today at DC Startup Week. Please join me in welcoming him to the DC Startup Week stage. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights with you today. So yeah, let's jump right into it over here. And we will talk about top 5 CX strategies every startup should know. I'm going to start just on a slightly egotistical note and talk about myself, but mainly just to set the stage for where I'm coming from. So my background is actually in the contact center space. So for the past 15 years or so, I spent my time managing contact centers at various companies. And most of those were in the SMB space or the mid-market space, but include some startup experience. I was at a company called Ticket Network, where we had a team of about 30 people in our call center, and that grew to about 150 people. And I was at another company called Albert, where we had also about 30 to 40 people in our contact center, and that grew to also about 150 people or so. And I also had a customer experience for the food tech company Freshly, where I joined them at Series A with 6 people in the corporate office and one poor person answering all the customer contacts, and spent 6 years there and grew that to a team of 350 people globally. So I've kind of been through that startup experience and the highs and the lows and the highs again. So the lessons I'm going to impart to you are lessons that I've taken with me as I've traversed this journey in my own life. Before we get going, I want to talk a little bit about who we are here at Freshworks, so you have that context. So we are a company that has a wide suite of products, and we believe in delighting customers and delighting employees, because nowadays, especially in the customer support world, we recognize that those things go in tandem. When it comes to delighting customers, we have a suite of products: Freshdesk, which is our support platform, so a ticketing system and a telephony solution, and also Freshsales and Freshmarketer for you to engage with your leads and prospects, and also engage with customers post-purchase. On the employee side of things, we have Freshservice, which is an IT ticket management system, and also Freshteam, which is an HRIS platform. Lastly, we have Freshchat in the conversational engagement space that spans across CX and EX. So our Freshchat product is live chat and messaging channels, so SMS, WhatsApp, Apple Business Chat, et cetera, and also our native bots technology as well. So as you see, pretty vibrant suite, and it's all powered by what we call our Neo platform, which is a shared data and processes across all these products that allows you to get rich data insights by having all this data in one place rather than siloed. So that's kind of where we're coming from. We have over 50,000 customers across 120 countries and all sorts of different verticals. So as we like to say, we're for the Fortune 5 million as well as the Fortune 500, and aim to be kind of a long-term partner with our customers as they go through their journeys from startup to enterprise level. Now let's jump right into it. So I'm going to talk about 5 strategies to build your CX. And because of my experience, I'm going to put a lot of focus on the customer support space, but I think you'll discover that many of the things I'll touch on have broad relevance to your organization generally. So hopefully you'll find a lot of learnings that you can apply to your company, period. So the first strategy is build infrastructure as you go. The way I like to put it is, there's that common phrasing that, in the startup world, you're building the plane as you're flying it, right? Which is very true. But I think the part that's sometimes missing from that is that you're not only building the plane while you're flying it, but you're also writing the manual at the same time, or you should be. So there are 3 things that you're doing. And writing the manual is kind of what infrastructure is all about. Let's talk about why you should build infrastructure as you go, and rather than wait till later on when you think, okay, we have a quote unquote need for it. One thing is that you have more time earlier on to build infrastructure. So I look at the startup experience as a bell curve, and everything's always crazy. But in my experience, even at that Series A point, you have a little bit more time than you're going to have when you're at Series B and Series C, when you start to get a lot of customers coming in and crazy turns to super crazy. And then later, when you get more processes in place and you're at Series D and Series E, things start to calm down a little bit, but by then it's too late to build infrastructure. So the optimal time is very early on before you go up that bell curve to Series B and Series C. So you want to build that infrastructure as early as possible, because as crazy as it sounds, you probably have more time early on than you're going to have a few series later. The other thing is that you want to protect your business, because if you're relying on, or not relying on infrastructure, then you're relying on people. And in startup worlds, people come, people go, because it's a hard pressed environment. And sometimes when people go, they go up, right? They go into different teams because people are promoted more frequently as the organization changes and develops. So as a result of that, putting your faith in people can be really hard, and trusting that the insight that people have in their head is going to stay there for you to use, that just evaporates. So the more you build infrastructure, the more you're ensuring that you're not putting too much emphasis on people. So when those people move out or they move up, then you're not losing all that insight and leaving your organization or part of your organization in a needy state. Another thing is that if you build as you go, you'll develop streamlined, slick teams from the get-go. And so you'll reap efficiency and cost benefits much, much earlier. So down the line, you're going to get a lot of benefits by making your teams tight and tidy in how they operate, as opposed to reaching a point where everything is just an amalgamation of messiness, and then you're trying to impose structure on things. So you'll eliminate those inefficiencies early on. Lastly, the structures you build will empower you to scale faster without the diminution of quality of service or output. So if you have a gun to your head, you could probably scale fast, but the question is, can you scale fast and at quality? And that's where a lot of startups start to fail. Well, they can scale, but quality starts to go down. But if you have infrastructure and you have standards in place early on, and you have a means of tracking those standards and metricizing those standards, it's much easier to maintain quality in your organization, even as you scale aggressively. Here are some tips and tidbits from my experience that kind of exemplify some of these things in action. One thing is you want to write SOPs for processes and procedures while you develop them. So don't just trust that everything's going to stay in your head or going to be some communal knowledge, but as you're going through the process of discovering how you do certain things, make sure that you write that down in a place and make a rule book out of it. Because again, it's going to be much harder to do that later. Another thing is you want to develop an official communication strategy. So information and knowledge is power. And especially with teams like customer support that are on the front lines dealing with customers and have to be informed. So early on, you want to put a lot of thought into how do you communicate things. So like in a prior organization I was in, we had what was called the announcement bundle. So if there was a major updates that we wanted to get to customer support, we had a 3-tier system where we put it in an instant messaging channel for immediate access, and we put it in a morning memo every day. Where everyone could access that and knew they would have key tidbits in that morning memo. And we also put it in an email format at the time of the announcement. So different ways of communicating things. So it's very hard for people to miss it. And each of those channels have their own benefits in terms of how you're able to communicate information. You want to define early the metrics for success. So you want to get an idea of how are you tracking success in customer support or anywhere else, and you want to have clear goals for those metrics, and you want to make sure you have a means of tracking them where people know exactly how they're performing and they can understand how their performance impacts the broader organization. So getting that in early is really important. You want to embrace key infrastructural programs early in your experience, like QA programs, and we'll talk about that in a second, and training programs. So really put a lot of structure behind your training, and very early on knowledge management systems. So don't let knowledge end up being a jungle of information here or there. Maybe have someone who owns knowledge and puts all this information in a place where it's easily searchable by people. Lastly, wherever you can, you want to structuralize content. By structuralize, I mean you have forms. So rather than say, hey, send me an instant message about something, have a form. So there's a place it's stored that you can run reports on, or use templates. So for your SOPs, make sure you have templates so people are going through a similar process of thinking about how they approach problems, and do meeting notes after meetings to make sure people are on the same page. So wherever you can structuralize, you want to structuralize. Strategy number 2 is define quality early. Quality is one of those things, and there are a lot of things like this that, we kind of know it when we see it. And that works for a little bit, but when you're trying to scale an organization, it just doesn't work to say, well, I know quality when I see it. Because if you don't define quality, then what you're going to discover, there's a certain point at which quality is going to start to dissipate, and you want to mitigate against that happening. Why do you want to define quality early? One thing is that it helps everyone in the organization get on the same page as to the experience you want for your customers, because where that's easy in a small environment where you're all huddled together in a shared workspace, when you grow and you're 30 people, 40 people, 50 people, and you start to develop silos, people start to diverge in terms of what they think quality means. So you want to get that definition early to prevent those silos and prevent that discord. Defining quality early allows you to set trackable and clear and metricizable standards, because after all, if you care about quality, you need to be able to track it, and you can't track something reliably or intelligently if you can't define it. So you need to define quality in order to track it. It's also important that a definition of quality results in more strategic and targeted training, coaching, and process improvement. So once you know what quality means, then it empowers you to do a lot with that. So you can feed that into your training program. So very early on, you can have much richer training for your customer support agents or your people handling social media. And you can have much more robust coaching systems because you're tying that to a definition you have of what quality means. And if there are performance gaps, then it's easier to identify those and act on those. Lastly, enforcing belated definitions of quality is typically torturous, right? Because if you're trying to impose quality later in an organization when you have 50, 60 people, and let's say in your customer support team, people have started to develop some bad habits, and then you come along and say, well, actually, now you're going to do things this way, and they look at you like, you're kind of messing up my mojo now. I'm used to being able to respond to someone on social media in 2 hours, and now you want me to do that in 30 minutes. So it's very hard to impose that later because you'll get a lot of angst and you may get a lot of discord from your employees. So if you define quality early and inculcate that early in your experience, then you're mitigating against those challenges. Let's hear some more tips and tidbits about defining quality. One thing is that you want to define quality specifically. So you want to break things down into component parts. So if you're in the customer support world, perfect example is people talk about empathy all over the place, right? But how do you rate an agent on empathy? And what is empathy? And what gradable actions exemplify empathy? So when I was running various customer support teams, we would break down empathy into different qualities, such as using the customer's first name and making sure you do that in a contact. Or if the customer talks about a personal experience, like they just got married, we expect you to acknowledge that and say congratulations. Or if you relate a personal experience of your own in the process of talking to a customer that makes you more relatable and shows you understand their pain points, you get extra points for that in our QA program. So you really have to define like what do these quality aspects actually mean and break them down into component parts, and that's what makes them trackable. That's a good segue into the next one, because you want to mindfully track quality feedback from customers, because it's very, very easy to track efficiency related feedback. So it's easy to track conversion on your website, or in customer support, it's easy to track response times or how many contacts someone's answering an hour. And sometimes there's a data bias where if it's easy to track, you think it's more important to track. But you have to be very mindful about tracking quality. So you have to be mindful about setting out surveys and doing text and sentiment analysis, which is another great thing, or maybe customer focus groups, or you definitely want to have a quality assurance monitoring system. But these are all things that take more effort, and you have to be mindful about doing that and setting goals for quality once you have these tracking mechanisms. You definitely want to build a quality assurance program in customer support, and you want to do that as early as possible. So even if you just have 6 agents, you want to sit down and think, what does quality mean for our customers, and what expectations do we have for agents, and how are we going to grade agents in that regard? On a company-wide level, you want to define customer principles. So certain principles that apply to the whole organization and outline how everyone should promise certain service delivery to your customers. And that can be kind of a North Star and also an anchor. So when you have disparate teams in engineering, product, marketing, et cetera, talking together, they at least have a similar North Star in mind, and they know what matters to your organization in terms of the customer experience. Lastly, you want to elevate quality metrics in performance evaluation. So wherever you can, in customer support or out of customer support, if you're tracking quality, you want to make sure that the weight that those quality metrics bear is significant, so people don't have a perverse incentive not to care as much about those and spend more time on the efficiency-based stuff. The third strategy is embracing what I call broad CX. Now, broad CX basically represents this change in the customer support world, which was actually represented by CX being used as a synonym in some circles for customer support, which is kind of a recent thing. right? And of course, we all know customer experience as a term also means generally the whole customer experience from the moment customers know about your company and they look at your website and they purchase from you. But CX, or customer experience, is also used as a synonym more and more for customer support teams. And that's very significant because it shows not only that customer support is increasingly higher valued in terms of its place in the overall customer experience, but because more and more customer support teams are no longer the call centers of old that are just reactively sitting there answering momentary questions, but they're teams that are vibrant, that are larger, that have more specialization, and that actually own more areas than ever before. Let's talk about why you want to embrace broad CX. One thing is that it ensures customer insights and responsibility reside with those who deal with customers the most. So you think of your customer support people are the people who understand customers in some respects the most in your organization and deal with them the most. And yet, that organization is typically siloed in the broader company. So it matters a lot that you're bringing these people in and giving them more of a central role to play in enhancing and translating the customer experience. So it's kind of a natural fit, and a lot of companies lose out because they silo their customer support teams. You also eliminate silos in the organization by at least having a main set of eyes focusing on the customer experience. So a lot of organizations care about the customer experience, but they do it in those silos. So marketing cares about how it impacts the customer experience, and operations cares how they impact the customer experience, but no one's talking about all those things together or seeing how they connect. So you want to have some team that doesn't necessarily run everything, but it has that vantage point where they can look out across the whole landscape and understand how the broad customer experience matters. Embracing broad CX makes your customer support team superior by involving it in broader initiatives, providing a broader perspective, and bringing customer support expertise into the wider business arena. So again, if you're specializing customer support and you're giving more responsibilities to customer support, you're empowering that organization to be even better in terms of how it understands and engages with customers. Lastly, embracing broad CX creates a cost-effective laboratory for experimentation and creative engagement. So you have all these different ideas in your head about how you could try out different engagement strategies with customers, and maybe, try to send out SMS campaigns in certain circumstances, but it's hard to institutionalize those unless you have a team that can actually try it out first. So I've been very successful using customer support teams with this broad CX world and reserving a certain component of their time to experiment with manual outreach strategies. So rather than institutionalizing something and spending the money to do that, they would try out different strategies for SMS notifications and just see what sort of responsiveness you get from customers, or maybe different types of email outreach, just to check in with customers and see how they're doing. So your customer support team can become a laboratory of experimentation to see what works and what doesn't work. And then when you have that data, you can make smarter decisions about what you should actually launch in the rest of the organization. Let's talk about some tips and tidbits here. One thing is you want to expand customer support to own sensitive channels. So again, people think of customer support, it's phone, email, live chat, but more and more companies are saying, you know what? No, it also includes social media. And in one of my prior roles, our customer support team or customer experience team owned social media responsiveness. So marketing did the posting, but customer support was the ones responding to people who commented on our ad posts or commented on our Facebook wall. So that was all customer support. And I have customers that I've chatted with at Freshworks who are making that same transition. So that's a big thing to consider, that you take these more sensitive channels and give them to customer support. And that also includes more public things like online reviews. So respond to online reviews and put that in the customer support team, or make sure that you're responding to all the surveys you're sending out and then give that to customer support. So broaden that scope of responsibility. You also want to create cross-functional teams of specialized agents who can triage advanced issues with operations and other teams. So a perfect example of this is, so many of you, if you're shipping out a product, you know the questions customers ask about, when am I going to get my product, right? And that's a big, big, big question that clogs up many an inbox. So think about your customer support organization as having a delivery team, right? A team of people, maybe just a few of your agents who are specialized in the delivery area, who can contact carriers directly for customers, who can triage complicated issues, who have a way to check in with the operations team if there's an escalation that is a delivery related issue. And there are various other areas in your organization where you have areas of synergy between customer support and the rest of the organization. And maybe you develop different little specialized groups of agents who can handle that and triage it and become subject matter experts. And also maybe help out operations sometime, because it can get expensive to run operations teams. So maybe your delivery team, if you have like a freight system, maybe they can do freight check-ins or truck check-ins during off hours rather than employing someone at a higher salary in an operations team to do that. You want to create a team to incubate innovation and customer engagement by experimenting manually and cost effectively with special outreach initiatives. So this is what I spoke about previously about using customer support teams as laboratories of experimentation. Maybe you isolate just an agent or two who are some senior agents, and maybe 30% of their time is spent on these initiatives. So it makes their job more interesting because they get these extra things to do, and you get the benefit of experimenting in these different initiatives and just seeing how cost effective and what sort of response you get from customers. You can also use customer support for doing crucial qualitative deep dives into data, because sometimes you need qualitative deep dives. So if you have a bot technology, for instance, and you want to track deflection, sometimes deflection doesn't really help because deflection is just tracking if the customer interacts with the bot and then goes to an agent. But maybe a customer interacts with the bot and doesn't go to an agent, but it's because they give up because they're frustrated with the bot, right? But you're not going to know that unless you have human beings looking at conversations and saying, well, in actuality, 20% of bot conversations that appear to be deflected aren't deflected, and we need to do something about those. So you will have tons of needs like that, and customer support people are a great resource to use for that. Lastly, if you're in the B2B world, fuse customer support with your digital customer success. So that's another thing to consider. The fourth strategy is champion conversational channels. Now, by conversational channels, I mean SMS, WhatsApp, Apple Business Chat, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, Instagram, live chat. So I'm kind of using the term, and it's kind of still a new area for a lot of companies. So people use different terms to describe it. So sometimes people lump together live chat and messaging as messaging, and so forth. So I'm going to use the term conversational to talk about like text-based conversations that have a conversational cadence to them. And so they're live chat plus messaging channels. And of course, these are all the rage now because more and more customers are operating in that particular space. So they're at SMS, they're on WhatsApp, they're on Facebook, and that's where more and more companies are engaging with customers. Let's talk about why you should go conversational. One thing is that it maximizes utilization of your agents. So only in these conversational channels, again, live chat and messaging, can you have simultaneous conversations with customers, right? Everything else is a one-on-one. But in these channels, your agents can handle 2, 3, 4 in live chat, and messaging, because the response times aren't as stringent, you can handle 5, 6, 7, 8 conversations simultaneously. So it fantastically increases the utilization of your agents and makes scaling a lot easier. It also vastly increases customer knowledge because all this information and all these customer contacts are coming in a text-based form, and you can run analysis on that text-based content, which can have extremely rich data insights. These channels also enable unique opportunities to use automation and AI technology. So when you think of things like chatbots, right, or agent assist technologies that provide real-time guidance to customers, or excuse me, to agents, and say, you know, maybe you should phrase things this way, or this is the next best action you should take, or this is how much money you should offer back to a customer. Those channels, yes, they exist in phone and email, but these types of technologies are most paramount, and you get the best rewards from those in live chat and messaging channels. So it's a tremendous opportunity to use some of this great technology out there that allows you to balance efficiency and quality. Conversational channels also empower you to proactively engage customers for service updates or revenue generation. So phone and email, hard to reach out to people and get a good response, but SMS, you're much more likely to get a response from customers, upwards of like 30% chance of a response rate. And similarly, live chat's a great way to interact with customers on your website if they're engaged in purchase paralysis. So they're loitering too long on a page and you think, oh, they may abandon the process, so let me send a little message and ping them and engage with them. And these are unique things for live chat and messaging channels. Lastly, still a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to navigate this conversational space. So if you do it well, that can be a real differentiator for your business that you can advertise to customers by saying, look at us, you know, we're freely available for you to contact us on your schedule and not ours, and on these channels that are so convenient and that provide near real-time insights to you. So it can be a great differentiator for your business. Let's talk about some tips and tidbits here. One thing is you want to put live chat on your site. So make sure you do it full throttle as soon as you possibly can. And ideally 24/7. And you can kind of augment this as needed using some chatbot technology if there are certain hours of the day that you're not available, or you can use an outsourced team of agents to answer questions in off hours. But as soon as you can, you want to get these channels up and running. I would say invest in at least one major messaging channel, or at least make a commitment to try to invest in that space. So if you're in the US or North America, which most of you are, for instance, then that's SMS. But if you're elsewhere, it's WhatsApp. But take one of these vibrant channels and make a committed focus on investing in them. You want to adopt a chatbot, because at the end of the day, chatbots have so many different uses that it's very difficult to imagine a future where companies are not using chatbots to some degree. So it could be more aggressively or less aggressively based on how your customers interact with those bots and based on what your customers need. But there are so many different ways you can use them, even if it's just a basic answer bot in your web widget. That can help you deflect some very low-level conversations, or sort of use that to incrementalize your approach and get early learnings for how customers interact with an answer bot that you can then feed into a broader chatbot strategy. You want to embrace a strong customer support presence on social. So more and more as companies advertise on social, it's natural. Customers come back and they ask you support questions on social. And this is really blending support and social tremendously. So more and more Facebook Messenger is a tool for customer support. And same thing for Twitter DMs, and same thing for Instagram DMs. So you want to get in that space, and you want to have strong KPIs in those channels, just like you have in any other channel. So tight response times and satisfaction surveys and all that good stuff. Lastly, you want to embrace some sort of agent assist technology, because there's tons of stuff out there in the agent assist space where, like I gave an example, you have a bot that helps agents in real time by recommending next best actions or recommending appropriate phrasing, because this helps agents not only balance more conversations simultaneously, but do that in a way that doesn't result in a diminution of quality and helps you to maintain that quality efficiency balance. Last but not least, let's talk about strategy number 5, which is institutionalizing innovation. Now, by this, we all understand innovation is an important thing that keeps you competitive. But the problem is that if someone doesn't really own innovation, then really no one owns innovation. And if no one owns it, then you're more likely only to innovate in crisis, right? So you innovate because one of your investors received a really bad experience, and that makes you think, oh, wow, we have to do X, Y, or Z in customer support, or maybe we should jump into more of these chatbot technologies, or, you only really jump into innovation when you have a crisis and you have tons of contacts coming in because of a major operational failure or something. So if you don't have someone owning innovation, it's very easy that you only really innovate in spurts and during crises, as opposed to getting ahead of some of these challenges. Let's talk about why you should innovate institutionally, aside from what I just said. One thing is that it pushes you to innovate all the time, right? So if you have someone who owns innovation, you institutionalize that process in a person or a team or in processes and procedures, then you're ensuring you're always innovating. Because in the hurly-burly of everyday life, especially in the crazy world of the startup environment, it's very, very easy to just get your head underwater. And you don't think about innovation so much because you're too busy just trying to keep the lights on. So you really need a focus on innovation if you want to keep it going at a good pace and keep yourself competitive. It's also near impossible to keep up with key technological developments if there's only a part-time focus on them. So it's very, very difficult. And you think of like the AI space or chatbots or agent assist technology again, and there's just so many different things going on there. And again, AI, we have sentiment analysis, and you have automatic contact tagging, and you have AI is being used for QA and AI being used for surveys. And there's just so much stuff to keep in touch with. It's very, very difficult to remain cutting edge if you don't have an institutionalized focus on innovation. Innovating institutionally creates safe space for innovation, where innovation and risk is celebrated, right? Because sometimes people in your organization aren't going to feel comfortable innovating because they feel that that's going to put a bullseye on their back if the innovation fails, right? So being very mindful of the culture you're creating. And if you're showing that innovation is institutionalized, even as a value in your company, then that's a very powerful message that you're encouraging your employees to think innovatively and that you are publicly rewarding that innovation. Lastly, if you innovate institutionally, it allows you to wrap quality around innovation. So if you're innovating in little spurts here and there because of crises, then chances are when you actually go down the innovation path, you're probably not doing it with the most strategic mindset. So instead, if you're institutionalizing it and you're being more strategic and more thoughtful about the process, then it's more likely when you innovate, you're going to do it in a smart manner that keeps quality in mind. And you'll get more out of the innovations that you ultimately pursue. Some tips and tidbits here for you. One thing is, like I said, you want to appoint someone to own innovation in your key team. So this could be a person or it could be like a small group of people, but ownership of innovation is really key, especially in customer support, because there's so many developments going on in the customer support space, again, with chatbots and agent assist and AI, because innovation, again, like parenting, is a full-time job. So it's not something that you can do haphazardly. You want to reserve a separate budget specifically for innovation initiatives. So it's and really across the board, right? Technology, people, and processes. You can innovate in terms of technology, or you can innovate in terms of how you're using people, like the idea of using customer support as a laboratory of experimentation, or you can innovate in your processes. So again, you create a culture of processes that encourage innovation. So whatever you do, it's probably going to require money to some extent. And setting aside money for that purpose is an important signal to the rest of the organization that innovation is important, and we're putting aside money specifically to invest in it. You want to encourage innovation through company-wide projects and incentives like hackathons, right? It's a perfect example of this that a lot of companies engage in. But think about other ways you can also celebrate and reward innovation across the board. So even aside from hackathons, what about the idea of having just a thoughtful moment where people can propose different means of engaging with customers. So different ways that you can try to retain customers or get greater loyalty from customers based on different check-in and engagement strategies. So maybe people can brainstorm that, and you select people who are winners from that and try out those different strategies through that customer support laboratory. You want to create policies and procedures and KPIs around innovation. So again, if you care about something like quality, you have to track it. Otherwise, you're not really going to know exactly how you are pursuing that particular area. So think about what KPIs can you put on innovation, and how do you even include that in your performance review process, as an example, to incentivize people to care. Lastly, you want to embrace incremental innovation to mitigate risk. So where you can incrementalize your innovation, and rather than making it too scary, because sometimes risk is what scares people away from innovation. So again, perfect example of this is if you want to enter the chatbot space, don't feel you have to jump into a high AI-powered chatbot suddenly, but maybe you start just with an answer bot that searches your FAQ, and then you look at the deflection rate and you get learnings, and then you innovate from there, and then you start to build out conversational flows, and you see how that changes the deflection rate, and you get learnings, and then you innovate further. So you can incrementalize innovation where you can to make it more palatable and less costly and less risky. Now that's it. So just reviewing the 5 strategies. So you want to build infrastructure as you go. You want to define quality early. You want to embrace broad CX. You want to champion conversational channels. And lastly, you want to institutionalize innovation. Now, I also want to take a little bit moment just to focus on the fact that we have this great startup program here at Freshworks that kind of works with startups and helps them to navigate this very, very challenging space. So you have a QR code that you can scan there, and claiming up to $10,000 in credits on essential products like our CRM, help desk, chatbot solution, et cetera, because as you saw, we have a very wide suite of products. And there's also some collateral in the chat that will provide you with more information in that regard as well. So definitely do check us out, because we have a great program that helps with some of that innovation that we were just chatting about. So that is it. Hopefully that was useful for people, and I have my contact information here if you want to reach out to me after the fact. But I believe we have a little opportunity for some questions here, so I will pause, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Colin, for giving us such wonderful tips on customer experience strategies. We have Colin's colleagues Suzanne and Shruti as well from Freshworks here helping us out, and they'll be conducting the Q&A session now. We do have some questions in the chat, so Suzanne and Shruti, whoever you want to take it forward.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'll be reading out the questions just posted on the chat. And yeah, so hi, Colin. The first question is from Juliana. So she's asked, the question is, can you speak more on how to build quality assurance programs?
Absolutely, yes. So, so one thing to bear in mind, so quality assurance programs, you want to start off with some sort of rubric, some sort of framework. And when I innovated in quality assurance, when I headed customer experience for Freshly, as an example, we wanted to make something that was catchy, that people could remember and put on a t-shirt, though, of course, agents probably wouldn't want to do that. But we called it CPRO, and every letter, so CEPRO, and every letter, so it's an acronym, and every letter stood for a different pillar. So it stood for being clear in your communications, empathetic, professional, which means that you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, know where to put a comma, etc. Rational, which is to say you don't just recite policy, but you explain things correctly. And outgoing, which is to say you're proactive in identifying the needs of the customers, even if the customer doesn't know them, and you follow through on any actions that you promise to perform. So you want to think about what are your pillars in customer support based on what that quality analysis. So what matters to your customers based on your business, and come up with some pillars. And then operationalize it. What you can do is put a few yes, no questions under pillars, because you want a program that is more objective, or as objective as possible. So agents don't think, oh, this person who's monitoring me, that's just their opinion. So under each pillar, you can have a series of questions that will guide scoring for that pillar. And you can literally even count the score based on how many questions have a yes answer and how many have a no. So in the empathy example I mentioned earlier, under that empathy pillar, maybe you have, did the agent address the customer by their first name? If the customer related a personal experience, did the agent acknowledge that? Did the agent include some personal anecdote, if relevant, into the conversation? Did the agent match the tone of the customer? So the customer's upset, they don't have a million exclamation points with limitless joy all over the place. So think about how you can break them down into yes, no questions, and you tie that to a scoring system. And at the end of the day, that becomes a percentage score. And then you set your standards for what is an acceptable percentage, and you make sure that's part of the performance evaluation. And you can do this on an easy way. You could honestly use surveying tools, or if you want to do it bare bones, you could do Google Sheets, in all honesty. But there are also some great softwares out there as well that you can look at, like Playvox and Maestro QA and Score Buddy and a few others as well.
Thanks, Colin. So the next question that Shruti also had is that, are there any differences in building CX between a B2B startup and a B2C startup? What's the best place for each kind of startup to start?
That's a great question. It's kind of interesting because the differences are less and less and less. And part of that's, like I mentioned, that customer support teams, like typical B2C environments, are acting more and more like digital customer success, right? Where they're not just about reactively answering contacts, but there's a heavy proactive component. And it's not just about momentarily answering a customer's question, but about the relationship you have with that customer, right? So in terms of pure customer support, I don't think there are as many differences. But now, in terms of how you handle digital customer success, there obviously are some differences there if you're including customer success in that. But on the customer support side of things, I don't think there really are, in all honesty. But I would say that more aggressive model, that broad CX model, is especially relevant in the B2B context, because you would just naturally have fewer customers, and the average customer you have is higher value to the extent that they have a high likelihood of being with you a long time and contributing a lot to your revenue. So whereas if you're a B2C and you may have a lot of customers who come and go, and you're trying to identify who are the loyal customers and so forth, in a B2B environment, every customer has the potential of contributing more massively. So in that context, I would say, if anything, you want to double down on the broad CX vision that I outlined, and that's especially fruitful in the B2B context.
So what would you suggest for a young startup with a lean team? How should they approach their first steps in building their CX vision?
Good question. So one thing is, I think you always should start with a North Star strategy, because a lot of times it's easy just to build things because you think, oh, we need these now. And of course, to some extent, you're just going to have to naturally do that. But you do want to have that North Star strategy. So you want to sit down and think, okay, and this is part of where that quality analysis comes in. So you want to think, what do we want to deliver to our customers? And let's say over the next year, over the next 2 years, over the next 3 years, and get that North Star vision. So maybe your North Star vision is, you want to engage with customers 90+% of the time on live chat or messaging channels, 24/7. And you want to be able to engage in these proactive outreach strategies to do check-ins with customers at certain parts of their experience. And then you kind of work backwards from, okay, that's that North Star goal. So how are we going to implement that strategically and incrementalize that innovation over time? Because I think that North Star goal is really important to build that vision and allow you to be strategic about that. And again, the quality analysis is a good example of that. And then I would say, look at how you can maximize the use of the people you have. So one thing I would say that is a good tidbit is, early on in a startup, you can have multi-use people all over the place. So you don't necessarily have to bucket people in customer support or operations, but what about the idea of having a customer support and operations team? So you have people who have shared functions, who are doing different things, who get their toes wet in the operational world and in the customer support world, so you can strategically use them to plug gaps where you will. And then you naturally see some people are better in operations or some people are better in support. And then you start to professionalize them. And so the people who are good in support, they now do the support stuff and they become the core customer support team and they get a promotion and they become the first lead. And the person who's good in operations, he becomes the first lead in operations or she becomes the first lead. But having flexibility like that can really help in terms of how you use people early on. Because if you have that North Star vision and you're planning out your road, one of the biggest things in the way is if you have too many barriers that you erect. And you're going to have enough barriers later on when you establish more processes and procedures. And one of the nice things about the startup environment is you have this flexibility that you're never going to have later in your organization. So you want to take advantage of that flexibility. So, sort of like someone who just gets out of college can look at a career landscape and has so many different options available versus 20 years later where you've started down a certain path and it's much harder to change at that point. So you want to take advantage of that opportunity to innovate and be flexible as much as possible in your processes and your policies and in your people.
Thanks, Colin. And with respect to empathy, how do you continue to measure empathy in a fast-growing company? And how do you maintain it?
Yeah, so a few things. So definitely having that quality assurance program is really important because not only does that set a North Star standard that you can use for your training. So when people are coming into your organization, like customer support, then they get an understanding from the get-go as to what you expect. So that's a big thing. And you can also look at AI technology here. So as an example, you have different types of AI technology that uses algorithms that can isolate certain contexts that need to be analyzed. And granted, this is on a high level, right? So the AI technology can say, oh, we have this list of contacts where something looks a little bit off based on some of the data associated with them. And it could be the number of interactions back and forth or the response time or some of the words the customer is using. So you can have that, and that helps you at a high level isolate certain contacts. And then if you have another QA program that's that more manual version where you have your rubric, then you can strategically monitor those contacts. So that's kind of one way where you can use AI and pair that with a quality assurance program to help you scale, because you'll be smarter about what you choose to monitor, and you'll be using your quality assurance people in a smart way. So that's one thing. And then another thing is making sure that you honestly are investing in quality assurance. So you really should think about investing in a quality assurance team. And sometimes you can blend it with the training function too. So they can be multi-purpose teams. You're getting maximum utilization out of people. But you want to make sure that you're investing money in a quality assurance team and that you're at least able to monitor, let's say, approximately 3 or 4% of contacts. So that's continued or considered a fair value, upwards of 5% as well. And scaling that team so you're regularly able to do that. And the last thing I would say to kind of throw in there too is you want to make quality a continuous education experience. And which is to say, it's not just about the initial onboarding, but you want to have constant training, like regular training, what quality means, and regular ways of celebrating high quality interactions. And having a corporate idea of quality, like those customer principles idea, is also really important as well, where you're kind of inculcating quality in the culture, which helps to prevent it from dying out as you scale.
Thanks, Colin. And for the final question, do you have any tips for building a strong CX team and minimizing turnover as the company develops?
Yeah, so some things that I mentioned. So the nice thing about it is that they inherently can minimize turnover. So a perfect example is broad CX. That makes life better for agents, right? Because people come into customer support and their fear is they're going to sit there and do nothing but answer contacts all day long. And that work becomes drudgery after a while. But if you have a broad CX perspective where you're taking a certain percentage of the time of your customer support people and they're doing other things, and that gives those people an opportunity to shine in other areas and helps to kind of get in the middle of the monotony of everyday life. So that in and of itself can help to increase morale. And also the broad CX vision creates more career opportunities. So a lot of people leave customer support teams because it's like, where can you go? I mean, you're either going to be an agent or you're going to be a lead, or you're going to be a supervisor, and that's it, right? So there's very minimal opportunity to do anything unless you leap out of customer support and go to marketing, which is also good for that individual, but not good for the team, because it sets the standard that you can only grow if you leap out of customer support. So broad CX also eliminates that problem substantially, because you're looking at a world where you have specialized functions in your support team. So you may be an agent today, but you could become a delivery specialist, or you could become a quality assurance specialist, or you could become a training specialist. So there are all these different paths that you can travel, and you can grow within customer support. So you have an incentive to stay in the organization, because it's just not going to be that normal drudgery. And early on, when you have fewer people and you obviously don't have the time to break things up into teams, you can at least have the concept that as people advance and they become more senior, they're given more of these responsibilities. So if the average agent maybe is handling special tasks 20% of their time, if you're a senior agent, then you're handling specialty tasks 40% of the time. And then that could be on the delivery front, or it could be on the QA front. And then later you can break people up into teams when you see how people are performing and so forth. But that's one way you can approach it. And the last thing I'll say is definitely be mindful about tracking culture. So in the same way you have to be mindful about tracking quality, you want to be mindful about tracking culture in the exact same way. And sometimes you have to do that uniquely within customer support, because customer support teams have a different culture than the rest of the organization. So I would say, just like with innovation, you should have someone who owns culture in your customer support team. And you should define what your culture is within your customer support team. And just like with quality, you need to find a way of tracking it. So there are tools out there that you can do pulse surveys across a number of different values or touch points on like a weekly or biweekly basis, where you just get a quick pulse check. And you can check that over time and see how that rises, to see how that falls, or see how happiness rises or falls in certain areas. And then you can take that information and metricize it and set standards for yourself as a leader in terms of what you expect out of your organization. Just like you set standards for customer satisfaction, or just like you set standards for quality or efficiency. So metricizing culture in customer support is really, really key in that regard. So I'd encourage you to consider some of those tools.
And thank you so much, Colin, Susan, and Shruti. We appreciate your time and support of the DC Startup Week community. And to everyone who attended, thank you for being part of our community. We have an exciting session coming up at 2 p.m. The New Way to Grow Your Startup by Ben Wright from Help Scout. So we can see you in the next session. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.